Hey guys, welcome back. In this episode, we're going to set up a couple of attacks, or in this case, just one attack for our sword, but we're going to set it up so that we can have more attacks in the future. The attacks for our weapons, they're all going to be physics-based. And by that I mean they're all going to be working inside of the physics engine in Unity. So we're going to be moving our sword around, and it's going to look for a collision with the actual the collider on the sword against an enemy object. It's going to check to see if it hits something. We're not doing like a check in front of the player whenever he attacks and sees if they're within range or whatever. We're just doing it to see if there is a collision. So we can have our sword do that, and then we can have a bow shoot an arrow, and the arrow look for the collisions, or we can throw a fireball, and the fireball look for the collisions, or we could do like an AoE attack around us, right? And we could just grow a sphere around us and look for collisions. And the way we set this up is each weapon can have its own attacks, so it doesn't really matter if it's a really complex attack, because we can do that per weapon. And that's what's fun about having it all it's all inside of its own object, right? It's all self-contained within each weapon. So to do this, what I'm going to do is we're going to go into Player Weapon Controller real quick. I'm going to open this up. And what we have done here is just an update for now. We're looking for the X button to be pressed. Perform weapon attack will be called, which all this does right now is handles performing the attack on whatever weapon we have equipped, which is this right here. And that, the one we're going to have equipped, the only weapon we have currently, is the sword. So it's going to call perform attack on the sword. And right now, I have this to just log out the name of the current item, which is sword in this case. And then it says attack. So we can just test to make sure that works. So if I go into Unity and I click play. Now, what I have is when I spawn currently, I have a sword. But that's not going to assign that to my equipped weapon property, because that happens on equip in game. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to delete this sword. And I'm going to hit V to equip, because we have it set up from the last video. The V equips weapons, and that assigns it to the equipped weapon property. And that's good. So now if I were to hit X, we see sword clone attack. And that's what we expect to happen, because the name of sword is sword clone whenever we instantiate it, because we're not doing anything with a name. And that is what's happening. Great. So now all I have to do is set up the attack to happen right here, and that's what will happen. So this sword, all that's going to happen is I'm going to swing it, and we're going to animate this in Unity using just a few keyframes. We're going to swing the sword, and it's going to strike whatever it hits in front of it, and it's going to come back and hold it at the side again. The way we're going to do this is actually each weapon is going to handle its own animation. Before, I thought we would use the hand and animate the hand, but I did not want each weapon to be confined to whatever the hand was doing at idle or while you're running or whatever, because a weapon may act differently if you're idling or if you're running. Then, say, like a sword might be different than a staff, or a sword might be different than if you just have a fireball in your hand, whatever kind of weapons you have. So I wanted you to be able to handle each animation for each weapon. So the way we're going to do it is each weapon's going to have its own animator controller, and it's all going to have its own animations confined within the weapon. And the hand is just there as a bone to mount stuff to. You can animate the hand if you have a general animation to be applied to everything, like a breathing or whatever, but in this case, we're just going to keep it on the weapons. So the animations change out when the weapons change out. So I'm going to grab sword, and the first thing I want to do is I'm going to set up the animations for this. It's going to be a very simple animation because I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. So I'm going to go to add component. Add component, please. Thank you. And I'm going to add, what we'll do is we'll add an animator to this just as it is. And I'm going to go to assets, and I want to create a folder, and we'll call it animations. And inside of my animations folder, we're going to have the animation clips and the controllers for our animators. So I'm going to create, and I'm going to create animator controller. And I want to call this sword, capital S. Doesn't matter, but that's why I'm going to keep mine. And I'm going to assign this to the animator controller for our sword animator. There we are. And if you've not worked in Mechanim before, this might be a little confusing, but I want to explain most of it as if you have no idea what I'm doing, so it should be okay. And that's all I'm going to do for that. And now I need the animator window so I can start animating in the animation window as well. So I'm going to go up to Window, and I'm going to go down to Animator, open that up, and this is your animator, which is going to show you your animator controller where you have your different states. It's a state machine, so you can go from state to state based on conditions. And it's a really nice interface too. So I'm going to open up my, I guess, animator, and then you have animation. These are different things with slightly different names. So animation is where you can control your keyframed animations. Animator is where you can handle your animation clips the animation creates. And you can transition from each clip. So, in animation, what I'm going to do is I want to select sword. And notice this changes and says, hey, there's an object created. You want to create an animation clip for it. And I want to hit create on that. And it's going to open up my Explorer here, and I'm in animations, and I'm going to call this animation sword swing, just like that. Now if we have multiple swords and the only difference is the stats and the skin, the model, we wouldn't have to make different animations for each one of those. We can just use the same sword animation. And that's why we use the same sword prefab, but we could just swap out the stats or whatever. So in this case, though, I'm going to just create one clip for the sword. Actually, we'll create two clips. I want another clip for the idle of the sword, but we'll get to that in just a second. So up here in the animation, we now have a timeline. We have a couple of different things. Now we can add a property, and then I have a drop down, and it says that sword swing is selected. Great. So I'm going to click Add Property, and this gives us access to all the components that are animatable on the sword object. And what we're going to animate on this is going to be, first of all, the transform. I'm going to do the position and also the rotation. Now, I'm just going to add a keyframe by clicking this plus right here, but as we animate it while this record button is checked, it'll add keyframes when something is changed. So I'm going to drag this animation window down here so I can see the scene view up here. And with this selected, it selects my sword for me. That's cool. So what I want to do now is I'm going to start off right there. That's the resting point for the sword. And we're going to have an idle that we transition into, but that's going to be the resting point for now. And on attack, we're just going to do a rough here. It's not going to be beautiful or anything, but it's going to come back and swing back. I would expect you to do yours better than me, but I don't want to waste a lot of time on this because it's not really the point of it. Notice it's animating up and then going back down to where this keyframe is here, and that's fine. But what I want to do is I'm going to copy these keyframes and put them down here so I know it goes right back to where it started. That was Control-C on those and Control-V down here. So it goes up, and then I want it to come out and down, and we're going to rotate it a bit funkily here to act like he's swinging it maybe. Can't really see what I'm doing at this perspective, but should work like that. It's like, ooh. Okay, cool. And then right here, we're going to make him swing it just like that. And notice as I'm changing the rotation and the position, it's updating my keyframes for me. That's great. I thought it was going to be a bad animation, and it's going to be a bad animation. So it's coming back, but I don't want it to cut through my body, so about halfway through I'm going to add a keyframe over here so that it doesn't cut through my body to get back to where it was. Just okay, cool. That looks fine. I would do a bit more if I were you, but this will be fine for me. So if I click play, it'll play, and that's what you get. Then we could speed this up by dragging these in closer, the attack, and then maybe the actual swing here would be start off a bit sooner there. So it's that's great. Maybe it ends a bit quicker too. But it's not, I don't want to be able to damage an enemy the entire time it's swinging, right? Because I come up, then I swing down, then I swing back. I only want the swing, the first swing, to do any damage. And to handle that, we're not going to worry about any timing or anything. We're just going to animate the box collider on and off so that it won't collide with anything unless I want it to. So I'm going to go to box collider on my sword, and I'm going to do enabled. It starts off as enabled. I'm going to disable that. As you can see up here, it disables it for me. And then when I want it to be able to do damage, which is like right there, I'm going to turn it on, and then I want it to do damage out to right there. Going to turn it back off. There we go. So it's on, then it's off, and it goes back, and it goes back on because of the ending keyframe, but I'm going to turn it off right there. So now it's only on right there to there, and then it's off. And that's exactly what we want. So now we know that if we're checking for collisions, we only get collisions during that little bit of attack range that we have. So we can change, that way if we change out to a bow, we know that the arrow only does damage when we shoot it. So we can animate it from when it leaves the bow. That's when the box collider comes on. And then we'd probably handle it by physics taking over from there. I don't know if we even get into that, but that's just to give you an idea of how this would work. And that's going to be that. I also want to quickly create another clip for the sword here. And it's going to be the idle. So I'm going to go down to create new clip. And I want to call it, we'll call it sword idle. And this is going to be just a simple breathing animation kind of thing. So it's going to start off there. It's going to go up and rotate. And it's going to come back down, right? Again, just very quick animation. I'd expect you to do more than this. Breathing. Well, that's not good. I'm going to drag this out a bit further there as well. Oh, where'd it go? And then drag this one out about halfway. Get a nice little animation there. Actually, that is not a copy of this. So we're going to pause that. And I copied the first keyframes, going to paste those over them once again. And now we get a nice looping animation, but it's going to be a little rough looking. As it comes down and the bobs hard and goes back up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all of them, right click, and I'm going to do a flat. Now if I were to play, it comes down, and it has a bit more of a subtle transition to the new animation, or to the beginning of the animation. And that's what I want. And we're going to rig these up really quickly in the animation, or in the animator, and then we'll get into the code that triggers this stuff to happen and checks for the damage. So in animator, we have a bunch of stuff going on now. I'm going to move this over here, move my entry over here. We're not going to be using any state for this, but entry is when it gets to this state, it's going to go from here to there, right? We know that. There's no condition or anything. We just know that this entry is going to wherever it's pointing. So I can think of this like, what do I want my first clip to be that plays? I don't want the sword swing to be the first clip. I want the sword idle to be the first clip. So I'm going to right click on that and go to set as default. And there we go. Now it's orange and it's the first one that happens. But I know I want it to go from sword idle up to sword swing. If I tell it to attack, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, do make transition, and go to sword swing. And now they're connected. But I want to make sure it only does it when I click the perform attack button. So to do that, we'll set a parameter. I'm going to go to parameters and do the little plus sign here. And we're going to add a trigger. We're not looking for a float, int, or bool value. We're looking for a trigger. It's something that just, it's an event that happens. It just triggers it, right? So I'm going to do trigger. And I'm going to call this base attack. And I'm calling it base attack because we might have a special attack that we have. Say we have two attacks. Base attack will be a regular swing, and special attack will be like a whirlwind or something, you know. So there we go, base attack. And now I can set a transition condition on this transition here. If I were to go over here to conditions, hit the plus sign, add a condition. We can add multiple conditions, but we're going to add just base attack to our condition for this transition. And that's great. That's what we want. But I want to transition back from sword swing to sword idle once that's done. So I'll do make transition back down. And the way we can handle this actually is that this will have an exit time, right? So it only goes back when this is done playing. So we don't have to set up an attack time or, you know, like an attack speed kind of thing. So it transitions back into it whenever the attack is done. What this is doing is once the animation is done, it'll go back to the idle. And this way the animation handles all of that for us. And that's exactly what we want. And that's going to be that for now. I'm sure we'll have a couple of things that we have to change, but that'll work for now. And now we get into the code and we write what will hopefully trigger this. All right, so in our sword script, we're going to have to grab a reference to the animator component that is on this game object, this sword. So to do that, I'm going to create a private, it's going to be Animator, to grab that component, and I want to call it just Animator. Just like that, and we're going to grab this reference and start using get component. So I'm going to do a void start, and we're going to do Animator is equal to get component of the type Animator. Cool. There we are. And now we can use this to trigger the animation that we want to play upon attack. So I'm going to just get rid of this, and we're going to use Animator dot set trigger, because we have a trigger parameter defined, and now we have to call that trigger to trigger the animation. So I'm going to do set trigger, and this can look for a couple of things. If I look at this real quick, we can have an integer for an ID, or we can have a string for the name. And we're going to use a string for the name. And mine was called base attack. And now just as an example, if I were to set up, if I were to go right here and do another method, it could be like perform special attack. Say we have two attacks, right? Then I would just do set trigger special attack. And we'd have a separate animation that does something differently. And we would call this by using a different key. Let's just go ahead and set it up just to show you how we can make this work. Now, this isn't going to work if you have like an ability system, right? This is, again, a simple RPG. And I've had a lot of requests for a bunch of systems that kind of fall out of scope of what I wanted this to be. And honestly, a lot of the time when I'm going through this and I'm planning an episode, I forget that it's supposed to be a simple system because I'm creating these really robust systems, and I'm like, well, that goes way out of scope of what I want to do, and it's going to make you expect other systems to be advanced. They're all supposed to be rather simple, bare bones systems that you can build on top of. So I want to make sure I keep it to that, and I stop trying to do anything too big. So we have that, and I'm just going to copy this. So this is just for a 2-attack system, right? We could have 2 or 3, maybe 4, but above that, then you got a lot of keys you got to remember, and you might as well go ahead and create a full-on ability system, or maybe something where you can have each weapon has its set of attacks that you can define in the interface, right? Maybe that'd be something you could do to kind of bridge from where we are here to an ability system. So perform weapon special attack. We're going to call this when we press Z. And we're going to do perform attack. Oh, okay, so it's not, it's iWeapon does not have, let's go ahead and go to the definition, because iWeapon does not have a perform special attack. So we cannot find it on the iWeapon reference. Now, doing this means that all weapons are going to have a special attack. But honestly, that's fine, right? If you have one weapon or a weapon that has a single attack, it's going to be pretty boring for the player. So we're going to make sure that we set that up to work just like that. And we may not make the special attack right now, but it is there if we want to go in and animate it to work. So this should go ahead and trigger the base attack. And let's see where we are in Unity real quick. Let's see what's going on. I'm going to click play. All right, and we're playing. We've got sword idle going on, which is great. It's looping like it should be. And I have a weapon equipped, but again, this is not the weapon that we equipped in game, so it won't have the reference. I'm going to delete that and hit V. All right, so we did not apply this to the prefab. I think that's the only issue we have with that. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. So I just clicked apply to apply the animation to the prefab. So when I hit V, now it has the animator applied to it because we set it up on the object that was in the hierarchy, right? But we didn't apply that to all of the prefabs that get spawned as a reference to that object. So now I clicked apply, that works just fine. And if I hit X, it should trigger the animation. Okay, so it did, but it just took it a second, or a couple seconds, because what's happening, if we watch here, if I click on sword, we can see it running in real time. It's looping sword idle up and down, and then about halfway through I'm going to hit to attack. Okay, so what happened was it waited till it finished, and then it went to sword swing, and then went back. So what we can do to fix that is we can tell it, say, hey, you don't have to wait until the idle animation is finished. Allow this trigger to interrupt that and transition to sword swing. So to do that, I'll just uncheck has exit time on the transition to sword swing. Do that right there. And click play. And now hitting X should attack. I'm going to spawn my weapon on me. Hit X attacks, hit X attacks, hit X attacks. And that is going to be how we attack things. That's great. So really quick, I want to set up an enemy just to test this and see how it works. So I'm going to first of all set up my my trigger to detect when it hits something. So the important thing is that sword actually is a trigger, because we do not want, I don't know if yours is a trigger or not, mine is trigger. Make sure you have trigger checked, because we do not want the impact to affect it in the physics engine. We don't want to push things around with it. Unless you have a weapon that you want to do that, then you can leave that checked or leave it unchecked. But for me, this is what I want. And we also want to add a rigid body, because in this, one of the interacted objects in the physics engine has got to be a rigid body. Since we're using a trigger, they don't both have to be, but in this case, the trigger is going to be a rigid body, and we're going to say it does not use gravity. We can actually make it kinematic as well, because it's not going to be affected in the physics engine whatsoever. And notice if I click play, everything should be fine and the same, and the sword should not fall through the ground. Okay, great. So now what I want to do, since we have that set up, I'm going to go back into my attack here, and I'm going to do avoid, and I'm going to do on trigger enter. Now this is a method, this is a callback that happens in the physics engine, right? So something happens, it looks for this method, and it's listening for this event. And what it's listening for is for the object that this is on, for the trigger to enter another collider, to go within the bounding box of another collider. And enter means it only checks it when it goes in, and it doesn't check it when it goes out. It doesn't keep checking as long as it's in there. It only checks upon entering. But if you go back in it again, it will check it again if it leaves it and comes back in. So that's why we disable the collider on the sword before it comes back through and hits it again, because we don't want to hit it twice. Unless you want your weapon to do that, then you can do that. So on trigger enter, I just want to test and see if I'm hitting anything first of all. So I'm going to do a hit on a debug log. And actually this needs a parameter here, and I believe I get these mixed up, but I believe this is collision or collider. I don't know if it's collision info for trigger or collider info. I believe it's collider info, actually. I get the names mixed up, but one of them has, you get more information out of the if you don't use a trigger, because it's actually interacting in the physics environment. But we don't need that information anyway. We're just checking to see if we hit something and then grabbing a reference to that object. So we don't need all that information anyway. So the collider dot, and we're just going to grab the name of that object. And it will tell me if that's not the right one. Come on. Okay. Hit V. Does this have... Okay, it's got a collider on it. Let's see what happens if I were to swing and hit it. Hit NPC. Cool, so it worked. Great. So what I want to do with that now is I want to check to see if I'm hitting a certain object, and we're going to use a tag in Unity to see if we're hitting something tagged with a certain tag. So I'm going to do an if and check to see what the tag is. Say if the collider.tag, so the tag assigned to this object, is equal to a certain string, and we're going to name this tag enemy. Name it whatever you want as long as you know what it means. Mine's going to be called enemy. And if it does hit an enemy, what we have to do is we have to take the enemy and we have to grab a reference to, say, the enemy component on that. But to do that, we have to go ahead and set that up real quick. So I'm going to go into my scripts here, and we're going to set up an enemy interface like we did with the weapon, so that we can make sure that all of our enemies share a couple of components, and then, or a couple of properties, I shouldn't say components, a couple of properties, and then we will use that interface to reference those enemies when we collide with them. So I'm going to create an eye enemy, just like our weapon, and also going to create an enemy just to play around with for now. Something like a slime will work. Going to go into enemy really quick, reload everything, and make sure everything's all hooked up. And eye enemy is going to be an interface, right? So I get rid of all this. I'm going to call it, or it's an interface, is called eye enemy. That's great. But this is going to have, let's say, it'll have eye enemy needs, what does it need? We'll just give it a take damage method, and it needs an amount of damage to take. So if it gets hit, we call the take damage method on the enemy, so the enemy takes damage. If we call it do damage, it'll be confusing on the enemy side because it'll sound like an attack. On the player side, it sounds like do damage to that, but you have to think of it from the object itself, not from some other object. And do a void again for perform attack. That's going to be our attack. And we'll probably come in and add a couple things, but we just want to get this up and running real quick to test out the attacking. So we have a slime, and we're going to implement that interface eye enemy. And again, it's going to be like, hey, you need to do some stuff. So I'm going to right click on that and do implement interface, just like that, and it's going to add our methods for us. And we don't need to perform attack yet, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to keep the not implemented exception in there. But on take damage, what I want to do is I want to lower the health and check to see if it is still alive. If it is, keep it alive. If it's not, destroy it. So first of all, I need some health. And I thought about this a bit, right? I thought about using the character stats for the enemies as well. And we could. It wouldn't be that hard. But we'd have to set up the stats the same way we did for our player in the character stats component itself. And honestly, it's a lot of work, and we cannot define them in the inspector. So because of the way it's set up, we'd have to create our own interface for that, or our own editor for that. And it's not worth it for what this is. So what I'm going to do to keep it simple is I want to just create a few variables that we can edit in the inspector for now to speed up the creation of these things, like the different monsters and things. And later on, if we want to come in and add this universal system for the stats, we can do that. But for now, I want to keep it just like this. And all it's going to be is public float for health. And then we'll have power and toughness. And then I want a private float for the max health. So health is our current health. I'll make sure I just put current health. And max health is the maximum amount of health this creature can have. And we'll use that to create the percentage of health for our health bars or whatever. Or we'll use that to heal the creature, or when we spawn it, to set it to the maximum amount of health. So what I want to do now is in start, we're going to make sure that current health is equal to max health. because max health, actually max health shouldn't be a private. I got that backwards. Current health should be a private because we're not going to be editing that in the inspector. But what I want to do actually is we'll make it all public for now so we can see in the inspector, but current health should not be exposed to the inspector so that we can't change it from the inspector. It should only be changed by being attacked or whatever. So with that set up like that, what I want to do really quickly is I'm just going to say current health minus equals the amount of damage taken, and then just going to do a simple if check here to say if current health is less than or equal to 0, then we are dead, right? If it's not, we're alive. So I want to set up another method. It's just like die, and this will just destroy this game object, which is the game object lowercase. It's a reference to this component, this game object component on this game object. And what I can do then is if we get down to 0 or less, we'll just die. If not, everything's fine. So if we, that should be pretty much what we need for that. Let's test it and see what I'm forgetting. I'm going to create a 3D object. It's a cube. It's slime. And I'm going to add my slime component. And I don't want to set the current health, but I'm going to set the power and stuff, and my toughness, and my max health to 20. So we have 20 health. And what damage will my sword be doing? I don't really know what the stats are, or if they're even working, honestly. So I guess we'll see, won't we? Hit that. Where's the slime at? Oh, hello. Okay, so I'm going to just whack him. Oh, sorry, wrong button. Whack him. Whack him. I'm not whacking him. Oh, he's not tagged. Okay. This is a very easy thing to forget to do. This will happen a lot. I'm sure if it's not already happened to you, you'll run into it. I created a tag condition, right? But I forgot to add a tag, and you're like, why is it not working? It happens quite a bit, but I want to make sure I create that tag. If you didn't see what I did there, I went to my tag, went down, didn't have the tag, so I went to add tag and created it. But now I have the tag, so I'm just going to add enemy, and that should be that. I forgot he's still under the ground, so I'm going to bring him up, bring him over, walk up to him. Now we should set this up to where we can click on the enemy, and the interaction that happens will be us walking to it. So I might make enemies also an interactable, but the only interaction that happens is walking up to it, because right now we have to click near it to walk up to it close enough to attack, and then equip my weapon and hit X. Okay, so nothing's happening. Why is nothing happening? What am I missing here? I'm missing something. So the take damage, am I passing it? No, I'm not. Okay. We just did not do anything over here, and I completely forgot. So I want to take the collider that we found by hitting, that we done nothing with, and I'm going to go through it and do get component. And I'm going to go on that and grab the I enemy. So if it is an enemy, it will have to have this if it's enemy tag, because we have to make sure it has this so that it has a take damage value, a take damage method. So we're going to go through that and do take damage, and we're going to pass it the amount of damage it should be dealt. And the amount of damage it should be dealt would be stats dot what I don't remember what this is. Stats dot power? Is that how we did this? No? I don't remember how we set this up. Did we set it up? Let's see. Okay, so we have to know the integer value. We'll always set this up so we don't have to know the integer value. We can just grab it by the name. But in this case, we have to know the integer value. So I'm just going to do a 0 dot get calculated stat value. I don't know if that's power or toughness or whatever the stat is on the sword. So we'll need to set it up to, yeah, we'll do something with that. But for now, we'll keep it like that and see what that does for us. I forgot to move the slime again. Okay. Move up close, equip my sword, and whack him. Alright, so he's taking 6 health, 6 damage each time, has 2 damage or 2 health left. Hit him again, and he dies. Okay, so that means, I know it's not very exciting, right? It's not, there's not a whole lot happening with the combat system, but that is a base to hopefully build something good on. Because what we have now is we have a way to create weapons, and we have a way to equip those weapons and their attributes, add those stats to our character, use that weapon to attack, and take the power of our sword in this case. Actually, what we should be doing is taking the power of our character and calculating a damage value, right? So that would be the idea. So I don't know why I took the sword stat and sent it over to the, I don't know, it's stupid. But what we would be doing is we'd calculate a value from our character stats and figure something out, maybe add a little randomization to it to make it seem more exciting. But that's going to be for another video because this video is already long enough. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions, here's what I want you to do. As a goal that we hit on the Patreon campaign, it was $65 because this is pretty expensive to host. I am now able to host a new forum. It's just like Forge Unity, right? Everybody seemed to like what that was. But I'm sorry to say that I don't have any of that stuff anymore. A lot of bad things happened. I don't have anything from that time period anymore whatsoever. But I do have a new forum. It's not forgeunity.com. I still have that, but it just doesn't go with the name. I wanted to keep it with the brand that I Game Grind. So if you have any questions, go to gogamegrind.com. Gogamegrind.com. Create an account. It's all free. It's very fast, very quick. And this is the quickest way to get efficient answers on your questions. The comments here on YouTube do not work for that. I cannot look at code. I cannot post code. And I don't like them. So if you have a question about code, go over to gogamegrind.com, create an account, and ask me a question there. I or somebody else, there's a few people that are willing to help me out with this from my Discord server. It's a private server, by the way. If you are a patron, you get access to it. For now, it'll be opened up in the future, but for now, that's how you get access to it. $1 or more, you get access to the Discord server. But the forum is open to everybody. You have any questions? That's where I want you to go. You have something cool you want to show that you're working on with this tutorial? Go there and let's talk about it. You know, let's create another community this time. That's actually something that'll be around. Last time it was a little rough, and I learned a lot. I learned that nearly daily backups is going to be very important, and that's what we're doing now. Almost daily backups. I learned that the server is very important. That's why it's a lot more expensive this time. So I've learned a lot of stuff from that, and I hope that comes through. So check it out at gogamegrind.com. Again, support this series if you can from the Patreon campaign. There's not a whole lot in the area as rewards because I want all of my time that I have available to be pushed into this channel. So I'm not going to waste my time making rewards. I am going to be writing written tutorials on the forum though, and linking them to the patrons that donate, pledge $5 or more, and it will be only for those eyes. So if you're interested in that, that's one of the rewards that might be worth something. But everybody else gets Discord, and that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for watching. My name is Austin, and I will see you next time.